With our new understanding of photographic techniques, let's start building a scene with reality. In the course of this exercise, we will examine a number of techniques for lighting and material editing. This is the final result that we will obtain at the end of this class. Stage by stage, we will build it until we get to the final result. And in the process, we will cover a series of topics that include lighting and material configuration. This scene shows one of the interesting applications of reality and lux for the creation of fantasy and superhero illustration. The realism of the render makes it striking, but the classic superhero pose and the lighting give it a larger-than-life dimension. We will try to make the light shine through the glass, and we will work on the costumes material to create the effects that you see. We will create the metal for the swords, work a bit of translucency into the character's hair, and fine-tune all the little details that make this image work. The scene uses the free Radiance of the Spirit environment available in the link that you see on the screen. The Victoria outfit is Helsing from Daz. Here is the link. Of course, you can use any outfit that you want if you don't have this one. I save the pose for the character and the camera as Studio Pose presets, and the files are included with your download so you can frame the scene exactly as I did. I also save the lights, but please don't use the preset yet, since we want to go through the steps involved. As you will see during the tutorials, I use a Macintosh, so the user interface reflects that operating system. Everything about Studio and Reality should look pretty much the same on Windows. The base where the character stands is from the Basecamp prop, also sold at Daz. Of course, you can replace it with anything you want. Let's start by adding the Radiance prop to the scene. This simple prop has one of the most striking windows available and gives us all that we need for the background. As you drop the prop in the scene, you will see these little columns in it. We will not need them, so let's click on the Eye in the Scene tab and hide them. Hidden nodes in the scene are ignored by Reality and will not be exported to Lux for rendering. This saves both time and memory. Let's add Victoria and give her the right pose. As you prepare the scene and do some test renders, you want to keep this as simple as possible, so keep the character naked and without hair. This speeds things up considerably. We will add clothing and hair a little later in this lesson. I saved the pose as a pose preset for Studio. To apply it, we use the File Merge command from the menu. This command loads another Studio file in the current scene. Since the file in this case is a pose preset, the result is to apply the pose. But before we do that, we need to disable the limits for the head and neck of Victoria, because I forced the pose beyond the predefined limits of the character, and if we apply the pose with the limits on, we end up with an incomplete pose. So we make sure that Victoria is selected, and in the Parameters tab, we click on the menu and disable the limits. Neck, and the same for the head. I also need to apply the Morphs++, since I changed a couple of attributes for the waist and other parts of the torso to give her more superhero proportions. Now we can apply the pose with File Merge. Okay, the pose works. As you see, I turned the lower part of the legs and arms invisible, since they are covered by the boots and the gloves, and there is no need to waste memory in exporting them to Lux. Remember, all hidden objects are ignored by Reality. Next, we want to set up the camera correctly. First of all, this scene is set to use a widescreen format. I usually shoot at 16:9 ratio, so that the images are ready for being included in video. will fit high-definition display, and will transfer to YouTube without distortion. A good size of frame is 1280 by 720, what is normally called 720p when discussing HD TVs. The default camera of Studio comes with a focal length of 65mm. That is almost okay for portraits, but I usually set my portrait camera at 80mm or higher. But it's definitely not working for a wide shot like this. We need a much larger field of view, so let's repeat the file merge operation and apply the camera preset to it. Let's click on the parameters for the camera, and we can see that the focal length is set at 35mm, which gives us a much wider field of view and more dramatic perspective. Since Victoria seems to be floating in the air, let's add the base. If you want the same base that I use for this setup, I use the wood topper. Now, let me switch to the two-camera view so that we can look at the base more clearly. As you can see, it is too big and out of place. If I move the base, we see that the top is not connected to it. In the Scene tab, let's drag it to the base so that the top is parented. Now I can move the base and the top will follow. All we need to do then is to adjust the coordinates for the base. The scale is 56.8%. The Y position is at 5.10. And the Z position is at 78-77. Voila! Now the base is in the right spot. Looking at the camera frame, we see that the wall and window are not yet like in the target image. In fact, we can see the perimeter of the wall, and that breaks the illusion that we are actually inside a closed space. We need to make some adjustments to the size and position of the environment. We start with the scale, since we need this wall to be much bigger. I saved the numbers that I used in my original scene, and those are 199.1 for the scale, the Y position is at 31.65, and the Z position is at 91.84. And here we have the right frame. Now we can start dressing our character. We start with the gloves, then the corset, underwear, the loin skirt, boots, swords, and belts. The belts come with their own swords, which we need to make invisible. Fortunately, there is a preset for that in the Poses folder. I also saved the pose for the loin skirt, which was a bit challenging to set up. For this item, you need to disable the limits as well before applying the pose. Okay, so let's select the File Merge menu again and select the Magdalena loinskirt.dsa file. If you wonder about the name used for this scene, I took inspiration from one of my favorite comic books characters, the Magdalena, published by Cow Comics. Yes, I'm a geek. While the probability of having a scantily clad statuesque beauty accessorized with Japanese swords working for the Vatican is very, very low, the character is very dramatic and her outfit is a work of art. I looked at a few covers for the Sacred Blood miniseries to get inspiration and came up with this composition. When it was time to pick a file name to save the scene, it was just easier to use Magdalena. Alright, it starts looking like the original target image. I need to simply apply the other material for the outfit. For this illustration, I went for the dark warrior look. Let's apply the alternative textures. Finally, we can select a texture for Victoria. In my example, I used Rio, but you could try anything else. The Rebby textures are excellent. The Daz Elite ones are very good too. Alright, it's looking more like the original. We will leave the hair for last since it adds more geometry and that slows down the test renders. Let's save our work and start adjusting the lighting and materials. For the base, I changed the material for the top and middle ring to be metal with copper preset. I set the polish to 8400 and kept the uniform flag on. One thing that I added is a bump map. The plain copper seemed just too plain for this scene, so I made a simple map using a texture generator and added that image in the bump map channel of the material. Here you can see it. I included the map with the files distributed with the tutorial. You can see the values used for the bump map on the screen. When adding lights, you should have an idea of what you will try to achieve with them. This doesn't need to be a detailed plan, but keep things simple at this stage. One way of starting this process is to ask yourself what will be the mood of the scene. For example, do you want it to be moody, gloomy, heroic, cheery, documentary-like? This approach gives you a good starting point. After you determine that, think how would you achieve that in real life, not in 3D, in real life. This is crucial. Do not think of how that scene would look in real life, but how you would achieve the look if you had a camera and some real lights. What is important to understand is that when you look at some movies and you like, say, the evocative power of a scene from Lord of the Rings, those scenes are created with an incredible array of lights and reflectors and other devices that control the light. For example, this behind-the-scene photo shows you a light setup for a toy commercial. The final result is something like this. As you can see, the lighting is nothing like what you see in a common room where children play. Keep in mind that what a camera sees is different from what our eyes see. Plus, there are elements in the scene that require some enhancement to make the mood shift in the direction desired. One rule is simple to remember. Don't add a light unless you have a need for it. If something in the lighting is not working, you don't want to add lights. You want to remove them. Adding lights without a clear reason for them to be in the scene is generally making things worse, not better. So, with that in mind, let's take a break and I'll see you in lesson 4.